We begin with President Donald Trump's immigration crackdown and the increasingly aggressive tactics used by the administration as it ramps up its efforts to hit its deportation goals set by Stephen Miller, who is not the president of the United States. Immigration and Customs Enforcement have escalated its immigration raids on restaurants, businesses, as well as showing up at immigration courts around the country where folks are checking in as we require them to do. We are seeing even more National Guard troops being deployed in Los Angeles, even as the city has remained mostly peaceful this week. And yesterday, Vice President J.D. Vance traveled to L.A., where he toured a command center and met with Marines who were sent to the city. He notably wasn't arrested or roughed up by any officials. And then there is the disturbing pattern emerging of the government's crackdown extending to the political opposition, with the number of Democratic elected officials, like you're seeing on your screen, being handcuffed, arrested, or even indicted in these efforts. With the latest example being New York City Comptroller and mayoral candidate Brad Lander, who was arrested Tuesday at an immigration court after he tried to escort a migrant whom officers were attempting to arrest. DHS accused Lander of assaulting law enforcement, though the video does not clearly show any such assault, and no charges have been filed just yet. It came just 5 days after California Senator Alex Padilla was forcibly removed from a DHS press event and handcuffed. Senator Padilla gave an impassioned speech on the Senate floor this week.
If that is what the administration is willing to do to a United States senator for having the authority to simply ask a question, imagine what they'll do to any American who dares to speak up. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent. We all have a responsibility to speak up and to push back before it's too late. So I do encourage people to keep peacefully protesting. There's nothing more patriotic than to peacefully protest for your rights.
We're joined now by the senior senator from California, Alex Padilla. Senator, I want to play some sound from the vice president's trip to Los Angeles yesterday and get your response on the other side.
Sure. Well, I was hoping Jose Padilla would be here to ask a question, but unfortunately, I guess he decided not to show up because there wasn't the theater. And that's all it is. You know, I think everybody realizes that's what this is. It's pure political theater. These guys show up. They want to be captured on camera doing something. They want to be able to go back to their far left groups and to say, look, me, I stood up against border enforcement. I stood up against Donald Trump. When all they're really standing up for is for drug cartels to run rampant over our country and sex traffickers to be able to continue to traffic little kids into our country. That's what you're doing when you stand against border enforcement. So I think these guys, we ought to laugh them out of the building.
Just want to say some things here. Vice President J.D. Vance served with you in the Senate for multiple years. He is currently the president of the Senate where you serve. He also went to Yale. I assume that he knows your name is Alex Padilla. Your response to him calling you Jose?
Oh, he knows my name. He knows my name. Look, sadly, it's just an indicator of how petty and unserious this administration is. But he's the vice president of the United States. You think he'd take the situation in Los Angeles more seriously? You know, you think maybe he'd take a moment to talk to some of the families who have been impacted, have been terrorized, to feel what's really going on the ground. I mean, you saw him shaking hands with Marines, but did he listen to the Marines? Because we have, you know, report after report of the Marines, so many of the Marines themselves that don't want to be there. That's not why they enlisted. Or if not the migrant families, how about the employers, right, who I know are speaking up because they're concerned about their workforce? Or how about this? Just take a moment and talk to the sheriff of Los Angeles County. Talk to the chief of police of Los Angeles City and hear from them their frustration for the lack of communication, the lack of coordination, this unnecessary and counterproductive buildup of the National Guard and the Marines, making their job as local law enforcement more difficult. Or even if you couldn't do that, how about taking a moment to go to the Pacific Palisades and Pasadena, Altadena, and talk to the families who lost everything in the fires from last January? Because guess what? Months and months later, there's still no additional disaster aid coming to so many people in the region. We've got a lot of important work to do, but this is how the vice president chooses to act, and that says a lot.
You know, we should also point out that a Vance spokesperson said, quote, of the vice president, he must have mixed up two people who have broken the law. You didn't break any laws.
I didn't break any laws.
Senator, we've known each other for a long time. You are a calm, serious, mild-mannered person. But ever since what happened to you and watching it just now on the screen, and tell me if I'm wrong, I sense a change in you. How has what happened to you at that press conference changed you?
Yeah, well, I think people who have known me for a long, long time would tell you, don't mistake kindness for weakness, right? The work that we do is serious. You know, and I've been serious about my service, my oath to office, my commitment to my constituents for a long time. But when we see overreach, so much overreach like we've seen from this administration since January 20th, we have no choice but to stand up. We have no choice but to speak up. And look, I think what happened to me, as painful as it was for me, for my family, it's not about me. You know, I've said repeatedly, if this is what this administration is willing to do to a senator trying to ask a question, imagine not what they can do, but what is happening in all corners of the country, especially in Los Angeles right now, when the cameras are not on. One of the things I've been trying to shed light on, and we've now seen reporting on this, is yes, if this was only about cracking down on drug dealers, violent criminals, dangerous criminals, et cetera, there'd be no debate, there'd be no discussion. Everybody's on board with that. But what this administration is doing is far from that. Recent reports show that more than 90% of people taken into custody since October have no serious criminal convictions.
You're citing a Cato Institute study, 93% no violent convictions. This came out yesterday.
Right, and so what is happening? That maybe 7-ish%, again, no debate, no discussion there, but the others, these are people that, like my father, working as a cook in a kitchen. People like my mother who cleaned homes for a living, trying to raise a family. You've seen images of ICE agents literally chasing farm workers in the fields of Ventura County. Workers in car washes, workers in hotels. They're targeting courthouses, houses of worship. Really, that's how evil these immigrants are, that they're going to church, they're going to work, kids are going to school. These are the same group, the cruel irony here, the same group of workers that the first Trump administration deemed essential at the outset of the COVID-19 pandemic. But they don't care. If the vice president doesn't care to say my name, the president doesn't care about what's happening, because they don't have any answers. Like, where's the counter proposal to here's how we modernize our immigration system? There's no crisis at the border right now that they're using as a pretext to, justify these actions in cities across the country. Part of my call is twofold, out to the general public who's worked up about this. What do we do? I get that question everywhere I go. What can we do? We've got to stay vocal. We've got to keep standing up. Last Saturday's peaceful protests around the country was inspiring. It cannot be one and done. We've got to keep active.
Senator Padilla, in the New York Times, you wrote an op-ed on how what's happening in L.A. could be a wake-up call to all Americans. I'm going to read you to you. What's happening in Los Angeles is a warning shot, but I pray it can also be a wake-up call, not only for my Republican Senate colleagues who have stayed silent in the fear of their colleagues, in the face of their colleagues handcuffing, but also for Americans of every stripe who think they're insulated from Mr. Trump's power grabs because they're not immigrants or because they're not from a blue state. Democracy doesn't fall from any one decision or any one attack. It falls from 1,000 cuts that slowly erode our fundamental freedoms. When you say it should be a wake-up call, do you feel like it is? You talked about those protests last week. How do you channel that energy moving forward?
Yeah, exactly. Making sure that it's not a one and done out there. We got to, across the country, not just in Los Angeles, stay vocal, stay active. There's so many ways to do that, right? Let's organize the next march and peaceful protests. We cannot let this administration have it easy. What they want is for us to be quiet and to cower and not call them out. Maybe your engagement or activism is calling your Congress member. Do that. Maybe your engagement is supporting an advocacy organization. You can do that. Maybe your engagement is making sure your friends and family are registered to vote and getting ready for the midterms. So that's what the general public can do. Everybody can do something. my colleagues. You mentioned, what I had to say about my Republican colleagues, especially. Look, I got to be fair and honest. There's a handful that have reached out to me privately and offering words of support since what happened last week. But only a handful, not all 53. And what I've been trying to make clear to my colleagues on both sides of the aisle is the way the Trump administration has done this in Los Angeles has paved the way for doing it anywhere in the country.
The tip of the spear.
And it happens to be Los Angeles. It happens to be about immigrants' rights. But clearly this administration doesn't like it when anybody disagrees with them. Anybody showing dissent, this is how they can come at you anywhere on any issue. And just imagine if the Biden administration would have taken these tactics, what would Republicans be saying? So you got to call it straight. You got to call it for what it is.
It's like, what wouldn't they be saying? Let me get your reaction to something that DHS announced on Wednesday. DHS says that lawmakers like you must give 72 hours notice before visiting ICE facilities. To my mind, that is unbelievably wrong. Am I wrong? Why?
You're not wrong.
Do you have an oversight role?
Look, Congress as an institution is a separate but co-equal branch of government. A key part of our job is oversight and accountability, exactly what this administration does not want. And so they will try to throw up any hurdle, any roadblock to keep us from our oversight and accountability role. That's all I was doing. Right? That press conference, as you know, I did not barge in. I was escorted in
You
by
didn't lunge at the secretary.
I did not lunge at the secretary. Thank God there's a video that demonstrates that. I had the audacity of trying to ask a question. And why? Part of the context is because for months and months and months, they've been dodging questions in committee. They have not been responding to letters from Congress or formal inquiries that we've made for information, for data. And so I heard there was this press conference, asked to join. They opened the door for me. I sat quietly on the side until the rhetoric compelled me to speak up, not just as a senator, but as an American. You know, the notion that they're suggesting that it's their job to liberate Los Angeles from our duly elected mayor and governor, it is too much. That, too, is a threat to red states and blue states. But Donald Trump has made it clear. He's targeting blue states as nothing but a brazen, partisan, political attack, and it's wrong, and we're not going to stand for it.
Senator Padilla, real quickly, at that press conference, it was Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem was at the podium. The statement that came out from the agency made it sound like this person just burst in and we didn't know who they were. Did Secretary Noem, did she know who you were before this incident?
Well, if she didn't, that says a lot about her, right? She came through the Senate for confirmation. Right? I'm on the Judiciary Committee. I serve as the ranking member of the Immigration Subcommittee, which DHS reports to. So if she didn't know who I was, that says more about her, a lot more about her than it does about me.
She know now.
Yeah, she definitely knows now. Senator Alex Padilla, senior senator from the great state of California, thank you very much